I can have your attention, please. Since our usual moderator is on our panel today, I'm filling in for Connie. My name is Jamie Bertelli, and I'm the Public Affairs Manager at Planned Parenthood of the Heartland and Planned Parenthood Voters of Iowa. Today, our topic for Moral Mondays is protecting Iowa's fair and impartial courts. And on our panel this afternoon, we have Representative Joel Olson, and we have Connie Ryan, Executive Director that you know very well from the Interfaith Alliance, and she's also a chair on Justice Not Politics. So I'll let them dig in and share more details about what's happening today, but kick us off, Connie.
Well, thank you. Thanks for being here and talking about this really important subject. I don't usually sit in this chair, so it's a little bit different angle for me. But this is really an important issue, not only for Interfaith Alliance, but as Jamie said, I chair Justice Not Politics, which is a statewide coalition of a lot of different partner organizations. And Senator, if you want to join us up here, you're welcome to. So Senator Hogue just walked in, and he is on the committee for the Senate version of the bill. So he wasn't sure if he could be here, but I'm glad he is. And so Interfaith Alliance jumped into the issue of protecting our fair and impartial courts back in 2010. As you remember, the religious right went on the attack against 3 justices and were able to unseat them, and they did that specifically because of the Varnum marriage equality case. And so we helped in that process to create Justice Not Politics because we believe in our strong, fair, impartial, nonpartisan courts and court system, and that it is a piece of our state and our democracy, and is critical, particularly for civil rights in our state. And so we've done this work for about 10 years now, 9 years, 10 years. And we just this year have this legislation, which is moves from attacking individual justices to attacking the actual system that creates that nonpartisan system. And that background that most of you know is that was passed by the voters in 1962. And because there was a system that really politicized the courts in the process and how we chose our judges and justices. And if you ever talk with somebody who was part of that back in the day, before 1962, I wasn't born yet, so, but there are people around, like Justice Bob Albee, who understood why the system needed to be changed and was changed. And it's certainly not to the benefit of Iowa to change it back, even incrementally, to a system that inserts partisan politics directly into the system. So we have this system where we have a nominating commission at the state level that gives nominees to the governor, and then we have nominating commissions at the district level. And those people are chosen in a manner that, to the best of our ability, keeps partisan politics out of the process. Are we naive enough to say that entirely partisan politics is removed from the system? Absolutely not. But Iowa really is considered one of the best in the nation. And there's information on that I can get you that shows what happens in other states and the systems that every state is a little bit different. It's tweaked a little bit differently. But I can get information to you on some of the other states and what those systems look like across the nation. But some of our folks in other states who do this work really look to Iowa as a model for keeping partisan politics out of the system as much as possible. So if you just walked in, there is some information at the end of the table. Hopefully there's still some that have Justice Not Politics at the top of it. The very first thing I want you to do, and you can do this right now if you like, if you have your smartphone, is that take action piece of it on the front page of Justice Not Politics. If you're on your phone, you have to scroll down one section. And it's a tool to take action, and you click on that and it sends you, our friends at Iowa Association for Justice have let us borrow their tool for contacting legislators, and you can click on that off the Justice Not Politics. It sends you to another page, and you'll be sending an email to legislators that we believe are in the House that very much need to hear our voices. And so they are primarily Republicans in the Judiciary Committee in the House. And with all due respect to our senator friend over here, we believe that the best possible place to have this conversation and to express the importance of this to Iowans is in the House. So do use that tool, and it will automatically send to those legislators, and you can change you have to put in the subject matter, but you can change the actual text if you want to, the actual email if you want to say what you want to say, or you can leave it as is. It's really important for them, and they have received hundreds and hundreds already from folks from all of our partner organizations that care about our fair courts. So I'm going to stop for a moment and turn it over to Representative Olson.
Thanks, Connie, and thank you all for being here. This full room tells me how important this issue is, and that people are at least starting to hear that it's out there. I think one of the most frustrating things to me is this is a huge change in our judicial process, and most of us didn't see the bill until it popped out the night before the subcommittee, basically. And so we have a process of changing our third branch of government, independent branch of government, the process by which those are chosen, and it has not been vetted by the public. So we need to, first of all, get word out there as quickly as we can. Both of these bills, both on the Senate side and on the House side, the study bills moved quickly out of subcommittees last week. And at least on the House side, my understanding is they plan to take the bill up in full Judiciary Committee this coming Wednesday. So their intent is to move this along before it gets much notice and much public vetting. As Connie mentioned to you, it changes the process by which the commissions are put together. Doesn't change how the actual selection of the judge in the end changes, but what the makeup of the commission, or who makes the decision about who sits on the commission. Currently, on the state level, half the commission is picked by the governor, and half of it is picked locally by members of the bar, not the Bar Association, but member lawyers that are licensed in Iowa, and they are elected within the local level. So it's much more locally, in my opinion, much more locally chosen process, and this moves it all inside, where the bill now says the governor will pick half and legislative leaders will pick half. No outside legal community input. All the choices for commissioners are made here inside the Capitol, and all by elected people that are partisan people. We're political partisan animals here, and so in my opinion brings a much higher level of politics into the process. You'll hear a lot about accountability from the other side, that they believe this puts much more accountability because elected people who are accountable to the public will be making the decisions. From my perspective, I think it takes away accountability. We currently have a lot of accountability in the process. We have a retention vote for judges. So all judges come up for retention vote every, I believe, 6 years. And that process has been, people have made choices on those. It isn't like every time they come up for a vote, it's just an automatic, they're going to get retained. We have seen in the past years where the public has spoken and said, you know, I don't like the decisions, I don't like the way this judge is working, and has exercised that retention vote to remove them from the court. So there is accountability from the public standpoint. But in the end, judges and the judicial branch is not there to be accountable to the people. They're there to be accountable to the law and to the Constitution. And so I'm very disturbed by how this bill moves away from independence of the judiciary and brings it much more in line with what happens politically here in the Capitol. Anything you want to add, Rob? We both heard very compelling, and I sat in on obviously on the whole subcommittee in the House side, and I sat through some of the subcommittee on the Senate side. Both heard very compelling arguments. I would say probably the most disturbing argument I heard on both places, in both places was, while they're talking about more accountability to the public, and that's what's really driving this, and no, it's not politics and it's not decisions, one of the people that spoke for the bill very flatly just said, this is about decisions that have been made. This is about the gay marriage decision. This is about abortion decisions that have recently been made, and we got to change how this is chosen because these decisions were wrong. The House chair of the Judiciary Committee has come out publicly and said, basically, that judges ought to be picked that are more in line with the governor's judicial philosophy. So lots of disturbing rhetoric going on, and we need people to pipe up and get behind this issue and say, no, 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 no.
Well, I agree with everything that Representative Olson has said. She's doing a great job in this. She said, for those of you following that, she said Wednesday is the day that's likely for the House Judiciary Committee. It is today at 2 o'clock in the Senate Judiciary Committee. This bill will be up for consideration at the committee level. So if you want to stay and come over, that will be in room 22, scheduled at 2 p.m. Although remember, we'll go to party caucuses, so it might not start right at 2 o'clock. But if you're interested, you should be there. Let me just say at the outset that I have reviewed the proposal. I actually do think it is unconstitutional. So the current system we have was created in 1962 by the voters. If you want to read it yourself, it's Article 516 of the Iowa's Constitution as codified, and you should feel free to read that. And it does contemplate that a future legislature by law could change some of the provisions in terms of the selection of the commission, but it's not the entire section that is subject to that. And there are two things that I think they're doing here, at least two things that are unconstitutional. Number one is the section contemplates that there will always be elected members of the Judicial Nominating Commission, and the bill they have in front of us doesn't provide any election process. So there would be no elected members of the commission. Right now, the lawyer members are elected by other lawyers, and that is something that voters approved in 1962, and that's the way it worked. And they're proposing removing elected members. And perhaps even more significantly, it says that each member will get one and only one 6-year term on the nominating commission. The bill as drafted would, the day it takes effect, end every single commissioner's current term and replace them with new people. So if you're a commissioner right now, and there are over 150 Iowans who are currently serving on the commission, their term would be ended by this bill. And I think that's, in my judgment, is clearly unconstitutional. But probably the bigger point, because that's going to be that will be something that will be resolved if somebody decides to challenge, if this is passed, and if somebody decides to challenge it, Governor Reynolds signs it on a day at say 2 p.m. and at 4 p.m. there's a lawsuit filed. That would be the kind of the scenario there. That doesn't really affect the public doesn't have much ability to be involved in that. But here's what bothers me. We've had this system since 1962, and it is spelled out in our Constitution. And even if they have the authority to adjust some of the provisions, they shouldn't do that. It should be something where if they want to change it, they should propose a constitutional amendment to change it, or they should at least raise it in a campaign, right? And I don't remember Governor Reynolds ever campaigning on this issue last year, right? So if this was something that was a priority of hers, she should have had the decency to campaign on it to the people of Iowa. As you talk to, okay, so Representative Olson's a Democrat, and I'm a Democrat. And one of the things I've learned in my now 17th year in the Iowa legislature is that sometimes different people of different ideologies and different parties respond different to different arguments. So there might be some arguments that you would have to Representative Olson or to myself that would be very compelling to us and say, we want to oppose this. But as you advocate on this, especially with Republican members of the House and the Senate, I want you to put that in your mind that maybe they have a different background and a different view on this. So to me, the number one argument to be made to Republicans as to why you shouldn't do this has two parts. Number one is, so you don't like this nominating commission, so does that mean you don't like Susan Christensen of Harlan, who was just appointed to the Supreme Court by Governor Reynolds? Does this mean you don't like Justice Waterman of Davenport, who was appointed to the Supreme Court in 2011 under this process by Governor Branstad? Does this mean you don't like Justice Mansfield, who was appointed to the Supreme Court in 2011 by Governor Branstad under this system? Right? Is that what you're saying? Or is it that on the local commissions, you don't like the lawyers serving on the commission locally? You don't like your local judges? I think you need to kind of say, if you think there's a flaw, where's the flaw? Well, the flaw for them may be that they don't like the fact that they lost governor elections in 1998, 2002, and 2006, and Governor Vilsack and Governor Culver got to appoint members of the Supreme Court. They might not like that. But they lost those elections, and that nonpartisan process provided the justices who were appointed. By the way, Justice Mansfield, who, get this, who was on the list of potential Supreme Court nominees from Trump, was first appointed to the Court of Appeals under this system by Governor Culver. Right? Sounds pretty fair if a system can produce somebody that Republicans seem to like in the year 2019, who was appointed to the Court of Appeals by Governor Culver in 2009. So challenge them to be specific about what judges they don't like. Maybe they don't like the fact that Justice Cady, who was appointed to the court 3 times by Governor Branstad, turned out not to rule the way they now would like him to. Right? But in 1998, Governor Branstad appointed him to the court, and before that he appointed him to the Court of Appeals, and before that he appointed him to the district court. So is that the fault of the system, or is that a person who's a member of the independent, merit-based judicial system reaching his own conclusions? Final thing is, remember, as you're advocating to Republicans, and I know they've got this is kind of their court packing scheme. Well, what goes around comes around. And if in 2022 Governor Reynolds is not reelected, do they really want to turn the judiciary over in an unfettered manner to whatever Democrat gets elected governor in 2022? And I would ask those Republicans to think about that. I think they need to, this is a moment where you need to ask them to take the long view and think about, is this really a road they want to go down? Because obviously, I don't think they have a problem with Justice Christensen or Justice Waterman or Justice Mansfield. So they've got a problem with the fact that they didn't win every election. That's really, I think, what's happening here. Final thing, I should say this. I should say one other thing. They will argue that they want accountability, and they will also, they've been making the argument that the lawyers on the nominating commissions, because they're elected by other lawyers, that makes lawyers super citizens. That was the phrase that Senator Dawson used in our subcommittee the other day. Well, why is that? A, of course, lawyers are super citizens. Pass the bar exam, go to law school, pass the bar exam, get sworn in, have to maintain our standing and have to maintain our membership and our admission to practice in good standing, right? So there is a certain element where we've done these things, but the more important thing is that's what the voters approved in 1962. Mm-hmm. And if you don't like that in 2019, who should make the decision to change that? The voters. If you want a constitutional amendment, if you want to change it, do it by constitutional amendment. Don't do it by this ram through, never campaign on it, oh, let's ram through this particular proposal in a legislative session. That's not fair. That's Republicans not giving Iowans the opportunity to weigh in. That's Republicans not listening. And don't say that when you're talking to them, right? Because you don't want to make them mad, but you want to try to expand their thinking. And with that, I will wrap up and look forward to people's comments and questions.
I think on that note, we'll begin to field some questions here. So questions for panelists, go ahead.
I was not an isolated island. We're part of the whole United States. There's been a lot of movements nationally. ALEC, Americans for Progress, a lot of those different, very well-funded, well-organized, conservative groups have flushed a lot of issues down our throats. Is this another one of those that's backed by the national conservative systems where they're well-funded? I mean, is Iowa just the only one that is getting this kind of legislation?
I will say this, Americans for Prosperity testified at the House subcommittee, and they are for the bill. I don't know that I can say that it's their language, but they are certainly supportive of the bill.
So attacks on the courts across the country in different states look different. It depends on what the subject matter is. It depends on kind of who is behind that. The Koch brothers certainly have had pieces of that in other states. We have not seen that this attack, and certainly not the attack in 2010, was directed by Koch brothers, Americans for Prosperity. The attack in Iowa has generally been because of the religious right and their unhappiness with a handful of decisions. So we obviously saw that in 2010 with the justices, but then there were also pieces of legislation that came after, impeachment of justices that were remaining on the court, those kind of things. It is our strong belief that this bill was written by the family leader, and you'd have to ask a senator or representative that's on the list to see if they'll verify that. But yes, Americans for Prosperity has signed on. It is literally Americans for Prosperity and the family leader that supports this. In other states, it's been, you've seen Koch brothers, but you also see other entities that have attacked the courts in different ways. We've seen that in North Carolina, we've seen that in Missouri, we've seen that in Kansas, just a number of states across the country.
All right. So there's something out there.
Well, and they all kind of feed off of each other,
Yeah.
but for Iowa, it's primarily the religious right conservatives that are driving the conversation here. Go ahead.
And my question kind of goes to what you were talking about, Senator, and that is the attorney selection. I listened to Zach Nunn yesterday. He was Senator Zach Nunn, was interviewed on Insiders, and they asked him about this court process, changing court process, and first of all, he says, well, we don't want to put any politics into it. But then he went on to say, he compared attorneys selecting commission members as big oil voting to put members on utility board. That was his analogy. And so attorneys are a special interest group. That's the way he described them. Is there any, I mean, how do we address that? And isn't it, just to clarify, isn't it true that Republican and Democratic attorneys vote?
Sure.
Absolutely. So it's a democratic process, correct?
Well, Rick, now that you've raised the issue of big oil, maybe you'll change my view on things. That's a joke. Okay. Yes, so lawyers vote. The current membership of the commission statewide among the lawyer members is a mix. It's a very, very bipartisan mix. There are a number of districts that have a majority of lawyer members who are Republican, and there are a number of districts that have a majority of lawyer members who are Democrats. So that is a mix. The other thing I would say on this is the bill actually contemplates that they're going to continue to now appoint lawyer members. And the reason I assume for that is that you actually want lawyers to be involved in the process, because right now we have this system where it's half public, half lawyer, and the belief is and was, and one of the reasons voters approved it was, that's the right mix of people to assess the reputations and the skills of the candidates for judge, especially when you get down to the 14 judicial districts that we have in the state. Then you're dealing with people who know people in the community and knowing people's reputations. So it is important. The Cedar Rapids Gazette editorial was very clear that it was good to have a mix of members of the public and professionals weighing in on this process. And this bill preserves it. What the bill does, though, is instead of having the bipartisan group of lawyers electing the members. Instead, it's going to be lawyers appointed by the governor, the speaker, the majority leader, and the 2 minority leaders. And the thing that concerns me with that is how then, you talk about politics and conflicts of interest, how then does the minority leader or the majority leader or the speaker or the governor choose which lawyers to appoint? It screams out Rod Blagojevich. That's a little inside joke there for people who might remember what sent him to federal prison. That's a lot more subject to conflict of interest and improper motives than an election administered by the Supreme Court among the resident lawyers in good standing for their peers. So they're not eliminating the conflict of interest, if there is one, and I don't actually think there is. I'm trying to remember from experience, and we asked at the Senate subcommittee, is there, because they were alleging this conflict of interest, and I said, has there ever been a case where you think that a lawyer who had been on the nominating commission had an unfair advantage and nobody was able to identify a single case? And so it just really is kind of a misguided argument for them to be making. But remember, there's a difference between good policy and what might sound good to in the public discussion.
The other thing I would add is that comparing our judicial branch and how we place people on the bench as judges and justices, comparing that to any kind of other commission is, it's just not comparable. It's apples and kumquats, right? Because it's a branch of government. We're talking about the judges and the justices of a part of our government, the third branch of government. So to compare it to how we put somebody on the commission, the utilities commission or something else, it's just not the same thing and shouldn't be the same process. We believe that having lawyers picked by their peers to be on those commissions brings a level of professionalism, brings a level of knowledge of, as Senator said, of who they are in their own districts, how they have carried themselves, and that they can be a good person on that commission to help to choose our judges and justices. Now remember, they're just nominating folks that then go on, but it's important at that very basic level that we have people who are putting the best interests of our Constitution, our state, our citizens at the top of their list. And so I want people on those commissions who are lawyers who have that professional reference and those relationships. As Senator also said, now in the bill, you're going to take from all of those people who vote and you're going to put it in the hands of 4 people plus the governor. How is that a better system? How is that more nonpartisan? I don't think so. It's just bad public policy.
Bad public policy.
I think I read that Governor Reynolds said part of the reason why she wanted to see this approved was so we could get more rural judges. Something like that?
She may have.
Less rural is code for conservative.
Right.
I thought what we were trying to do was to get the most qualified, the best judges for the state of Iowa, leaving rural, urban out of it.
Yeah, if you look at why we have this system, it's based on merit, right? We want judges and justices that are chosen because of merit. And so I don't know if she said that, but that would not be my qualification of how we choose a judge or a justice.
And again, this is where I think you have to ask people, if this process is so flawed, how do you appoint Susan Christensen of Harlan to the Supreme Court, right? Governor Reynolds was very proud of that appointment. They all seem to feel good about it. And I think you just really have to challenge that. And then you talk about the district nominating commissions. The bill actually contemplates statewide appointment of judges, right? So then you're all in a situation where you might be getting judges who have no relationship to the area where they're going to be serving,
Right.
which is very dangerous. And I will say one other thing. Part of what is going on here is, for the last, we talk about national groups. If there is a national group involved in this, it's probably a legal organization known as the Federalist Society that has been trying to remake the judiciary for decades. And what they really want is, they want to get somebody who is ideologically pure, regardless of their legal skill, regardless of their relationships to the community, and get them appointed so they can be conservative judicial activists, right? That is kind of what's happening here. So this bill, she can say that, it's immediately contradicted by her most recent appointment to the Supreme Court. But then what's really driving this is the belief that if you have ideologically selected members of the nominating commission, then you can ideologically select judges regardless of their personal qualities, right? Regardless of their professional skills. And that's the danger, right? Right now we have a system that is focused on merit, and it produces justices who have a diversity of views, right? A diversity that reflects the diversity of Iowa. And that's not what they want. They want ideological purity. You know, this is the family leader and groups like that. They want ideological purity regardless of qualifications, regardless of their relationships to the community from which they come.
They
And
talk
that's very
a
dangerous.
lot. They talk a lot about judicial activism and wanting to walk away. Except that's not what they're proposing, really. They're just looking for different slant to their activism. They'll use that phrase a lot, but there's nothing in their bill that walks away from that.
Representative Anderson?
Did I read somewhere that of the 58 judges that have been appointed since 2010, 58 of them are Republicans?
Well,
I mean, 58, that 56 of them are Republicans?
that may be true for the nominating commission members.
Commission members, I think.
I don't believe that's true for the
Of
judges.
nominations, okay.
Yeah.
Because we've only confirmed, I'm trying to think, because we do confirm those. We confirmed the State Judicial Nominating Commission in the Senate under current law, not under the proposed bill. They're going to take confirmation away. We also confirmed the members of the Judicial Nominating Commissions at the district level, and
At the state level.
and the state level, and the governor's appointees to the district,
Right,
the
right.
district courts, and
But you don't
I've
confirm the district court judges?
not the judges, the
Judges,
nominating
but-
commission members at both levels.
Okay.
And I think Governor Branstad and Reynolds have almost, it's not 100%, but it has been almost all Republicans.
Okay.
All of her appointments to the state commission are Republican.
Yes. She's had
They
it,
don't have to be gender balanced and geographic.
They do have to be gender
They have to be
balanced.
gender
And
balanced.
politically
No,
balanced.
not politically
only gender
balanced.
balanced.
The current bill talks about these appointments will be made with no reference to political party.
which is no party balance required.
No party balance, just we're gonna pretend we're not looking.
Did you just say something about this bill also takes away the confirmation process?
Yes,
Yes.
Can you expand on that a bit?
it takes away the Senate's confirmation process.
Completely.
Yes. Now, let me say this. It may be that they're going to change a few things in this bill, right? That's not really what we want. I mean, they could change this bill to allow Senate confirmation, and that would be a little bitty improvement. But it is still wrong to take away the voice of the Iowa voters and they should do this by constitutional amendment, right?
We always say you don't improve a bad bill, so.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have no idea, but is it something that they really are moving for is election of judges?
No.
Well, not at the moment.
Yeah.
And that would,
Right.
that would,
We set up already knows about this, so tomorrow.
that would take constitutional work.
I don't know, I'm
Yeah.
just wondering.
They're doing what they think is a piece that they can do legislatively because they don't like decisions that are being made by the courts. And so they're trying to flip the philosophical slant of the courts.
And they really they believe with a Republican governor, and they believe that they can get people appointed for their ideological purity, right? They see this as a way to pack the courts with their people, right? And the point is, their people, right, which is not the greatest phrase to use, but right now, the nominating commission presents to the governor to appoint a diversity of views, and the governor gets to make the selection from the list of 3 for a Supreme Court appointment or a list of 2 for the district court appointment. And there is a diversity of views there. And the governor's policy priorities are reflected in those appointments. What the commission does, it assures that all the nominees are high quality nominees, right? It creates that merit minimum, right? And what they want to do is take the merit minimum away so that Governor Reynolds would be free to appoint, just anybody who met sort of an ideological litmus test. And the current system does not allow that because you do have to meet the merit minimum. See that difference? I don't actually think they want election of judges because I'm not sure they'd win. I'm not sure they'd win that, and that would clearly require a constitutional amendment.
So I've not heard them talk about that, and actually there have been some statements from leaders that have said we're not interested in the election of judges or justices. You can take them at their word if you like. So we've not heard that. We certainly would have the full force of a lot of organizations and a lot of folks that would work to stop that from happening. And all you have to do is look to our neighbor to the east in Illinois, look to Alabama, which has a horrible process, Texas, number of states, and the amount of money that is a pay-to-play kind of thing, and court decisions. I think the business community has currently not been very public in their in saying they oppose this legislation, but they would be fully on board because they know that that is not something that is healthy for a particular state from a business perspective. So I think there would be a whole lot more partners if that were the case.
I think one more question, Sherry, I saw your hand.
So if this does pass through all of the hurdles and the governor signs it, what is the recourse? Is there?
Well, there would be two remedies at that point. First of all, if it is, as I believe, unconstitutional and somebody challenges that, that could be going to the courts, although of course that's a very awkward case to rule on, right? That's
Judges ruling on their own.
But judges, that's what they do, right? So that would be one recourse. The other recourse, of course, would be to change the legislature so that you could do it back, right?
Elections matter.
Elections matter.
Yes.
Voting matters.
Right?
Voting matters.
Although if Democrats were so successful and we had a Democratic governor, maybe we'd let the Democratic governor just pack the courts for a while, right? I mean, I'm not saying that's what I want. I like the current system, but if they do it for a few years and then in 2023 we're back here and we're in charge, maybe we need to let the Democratic governor pack the courts for a while to undo the damage that they've done since 2019, right? And I actually want Republicans thinking about that. I really do think they should be thinking about Susan Christensen, Tom Waterman, and Ed Mansfield, because if they say there's something wrong with this process, they must think there's something wrong with those 3 justices that were appointed by Branstad Reynolds. And then I also want them thinking about, you guys aren't going to be in charge forever, right? And do you really want to unleash this, or do you want to preserve a system that had Chet Culver put Judge Mansfield on the Court of Appeals? I think that's what they probably really want, but they just don't know it yet. And it's our job to help them make sure they understand what the consequences are.
Republican attorneys pushing back on this?
Very much so. I've had more emails and contacts from attorneys in my area, Cedar Rapids. Well, Rob, I know we don't agree on much, but And I've been telling them exactly, I've been giving them instructions on who I think they should contact.
So the thing I would say is that this should not be a partisan issue. Our judiciary should not be a partisan issue, and how we choose judges and justices should not come down that middle line between Republicans and Democrats. And so, but it has become that in this conversation. I would encourage you, when you're having the conversations, and you can go on that link that I told you about, it's there at the top for Justice Not Politics, and click on the Take Action, and you can see who we're asking you to contact, and it's very easy through that tool to do that. You can do it in your own way also and have direct conversations. But our goal here is not to increase the partisanship around conversation with legislators around the judiciary. Our goal here is to get folks to understand that this is the third co-equal branch of government that is intended specifically to not be partisan, and that the nominating commissions are a key piece of that process, and they should not be pushed into that part of our government that is partisan. The legislative branch does a great job of that, and the executive branch does as well of being partisan. The judges and the justices, our judiciary, should not be. And so bringing those conversations in of why it's important to you, and at the end of the day, what it really is about Iowans. It's about Iowans having a fair day in court. This is not just about judiciary and talk up here. This is about Iowans having a fair day in court. And when we have partisan nominating commissions, you damage the ability of real Iowans to have a fair day in court. That's the impact, whether it's civil rights or whether it is some other subject. Iowans deserve to have courts that are not partisan and are not politicized, and that our judges and justices are chosen on a merit selection process. Joe, do you have anything you want to say?
I think that is an absolutely perfect way to end this. It is about Iowans having a fair day in court and not having to think about the politics rolling through the courtroom.
Well, that is what we have time for today, so thanks everybody. Don't forget to sign in. There are sheets at the end of the table. Even if you sign in every week, still sign in. Thank you so much. Thank you to our panelists. Have a great week, everyone.
So your meeting's